You imagine a world where a wrestling promotion was respectful, they paid well, and everybody loved working for them. That thing did exist, and existed a long time ago. We're going to talk about a little St. Louis wrestling and why they were the gold standard of professional wrestling on tonight's Ring Respect Radio. Boom, just like that. It's Thursday night, and you know what that means. It's party time with us. We're the Video Bros. I'm Bobby Munson, the man sitting beside me. He is the man with the angelic voice. He's Papa Smokes. Papa Smokes, how are you doing, brother?
Oh, I'm doing great, Munson. Happy Thursday night to you, and happy Thursday night to all the wrestling people out there.
Every single one of you, especially joining us at the new time frame here, because in Saskatchewan we're rolling with the 7 o'clock like we always do, but everybody else changing their clocks all over the globe, so they had to reset their schedules to make time for us here on a Thursday night at our new slot 8:05. It feels good to be in a more prime time position here, Papa Smokes, lining up a little bit more with the SK. And oh my God, speaking of SK, how about that weather, Papa Smokes? We are getting a little taste of the winter weather here finally.
Just a little bit of a taste, Munson, and that's the way she goes. We've gotten off quite lucky this autumn up here in Canada. It's been extremely mild. Even today was a nice mild day, but it ain't going to last forever. At one point, that rain and precipitation is going to turn to snow. We got our first little taste of it today. I don't think it's going to hang around all month or anything, but it's just another reminder of where we come from. And hey, that's another thing about our starting time. We didn't want to change to 8 o'clock, which it would be 8 o'clock our time, because damn, we get little enough sunlight as it is in the winter time here. We gotta try and enjoy something. So we're gonna keep it at 7 o'clock our time. Everybody else, hope you can change your clocks and enjoy that.
Yeah, and if you can't, there's always the replay, but we're going to say hello to this man right here, Brett Martinez, joining us up in the house. Good evening, everyone. Looking forward to this. We knew you were, so here we go. We're going to talk all about St. Louis wrestling here tonight, Brett. Glad you could join us live. Oh, that's right, DSD. You stay the same in the summertime. We stay the same all the time here in Saskatchewan. We don't move them clocks at all. It is what it is. When it gets darker because of wintertime, it gets darker but because of wintertime. We just deal with it. That's how we roll here. So that's just all I ever knew, Papa Smokes. I mean, it was always funny when, you're younger too, and you didn't understand that everybody else changed the clocks necessarily. And all of a sudden, hey, why is my damn wrestling show on, an hour earlier or an hour later kind of thing? I never understood the concept till I got older.
Well, it's a weird thing too. Like even in all areas around here, they change their clocks. Back in Manitoba, you used to have to change your clock twice a year, and of course inevitably some people would forget to, so you're either an hour early or an hour late for whatever you had to do. Here in Sask, it remains the same. Time stands still in this province. It really does.
It sure does. But before we get to our big topic today, we also got to say hello to our good friend the Mangler up in the house. Hello, gentlemen.
Yeah.
Excited to learn tonight. Excited to have you here, Mangler. Thanks for joining every single Thursday. Appreciate you. Pop Smokes, I wanted to tell a little bit of a fun story, and this is a cool story from my shoot job today. So in my shoot job, we actually do a lot of community donations and stuff like that to people in need. We also go and sponsor a couple of the inner city schools in Saskatoon. We go there, we take them school supplies, we take them winter clothing and stuff like that. But we also go and participate. Like they have their holiday meal that gets served to them once a year and stuff like that. And we go help serve the meal and do the cleanup and everything like that. So it's one of the cool aspects of my job. I really like doing it. So they're doing their Remembrance Day ceremony today, and they invited our crew to come and watch this was not a volunteer do anything there. They actually just flat out invited us to come and be part of it, just to sit there and watch what the kids put together. So we roll into the school, and I didn't even realize this, but you might remember the two young men that sat on the opposite side to where the table and where you were doing the camera work at the Ring of Horrors were. The ones that were flipping off the baddies and everything like that. They're down there, front row. In fact, just a couple seats down from the Mangler, in fact, be the best way to describe it. So those two boys, I didn't realize, went to this particular school. So I happened to walk in the front doors, and the younger brother happens to catch a glimpse of me. He's there with all his buddies. So he's like, whoa, that's that dude from Prairie Pro Wrestling. I know that guy, guys. I know that guy. He's yelling it out. I'm just like, hey, buddy, how's it going? Right? I'm like, oh, that's kind of funny. And then lo and behold, as we're going to walk into the gymnasium, one of the kids handed out the pop to his older brother, and he's like, oh man, it's the PPW guy. He's like, awesome. He goes, I know you, and everything, getting all excited. So I'm high-fiving him on the way into the gym and stuff. Of course, then all the, some of the teachers and everything like that, like, what's this? You do work with Prairie Pro Wrestling? I'm like, yeah, that's kind of my other thing that I do outside of selling security is I'm into the wrestling. It probably comes as a bit of surprise to some of them when they first hear that out of my mouth and everything like that. But then the interest grows and it builds, and people become, enamored with it. They wanted to get involved with it. They want to know. They want to open those doors to the next PPW event, which hopefully we get to announce very, very soon, because the Ring of Horrors was just so badass. We got to follow it up with a good old season's beatings just around the corner, I'm sure. Can't wait to be able to announce that for you Prairie Pro Wrestling fans across the globe. I'm thinking it's going to be sometime next week. By next week, I'd imagine there's going to be an announcement about the next show. I can't see any other way to do it, but it's coming soon. But yeah, it was a cool story, Pops, folks. Cool moment, and I felt like sharing that before we get into our main topic.
Oh, that's a good one. I like that a lot, especially since, excuse me, it involves the youth of our wrestling community in Saskatoon here. Of course, everybody knows that children are the future of everything, and they will be for PPW as well, from all the nice kids that we know that come to the matches, including Anna and Bass Jr. and a few other kids as well. That's who are the fans of today and tomorrow. So you've got a couple fans there, Munson, and PPW has a couple of fans. Love it. The future looks bright.
You bet. And look at this. We got Ed Fries coming in so early, Papa Smokes. Oh, and Bobby too. Yes. And Brett saying he's dominating the football picks. You're doing okay. I mean, I blew it this week really badly. We'll talk about that on Sunday. We'll save it for that. And here's a familiar name, Papa Smokes. We haven't seen it in a while. It's Brian Carter up in the house.
Oh, yeah.
Sell the Cosmo Center a security camera upgrade so you can stream the live event. Brian, I am working tirelessly to get to a point where we can do this for you, my man. We've got one new camera guy in place. I need a second one. As soon as we can get a second one, we can get Papa Smokes off the cams. I will be able to convince them to get a single shot camera that we can use to stream on Twitch or something like that, exclusive for Twitch for the live events, so that you can watch them with us live every single time. And then that way, Papa Smokes and I can deliver live commentary when we do it as well, too, to add to it. Because, it's tough for fans. Like, our YouTube's a little bit behind. And that's why, again, with Ed in the chat here, I don't know if you announced it on Taking Over, but Ed and Astra have got a Ring of Horrors 4 early look is what they got. They got the full edited show courtesy of me, no commentary with it, but we did that so that they could do a review of it. They haven't had a chance to, catch one of the latest, especially our biggest event. And in saying that, I gave that to them. They've watched it or are going to be watching it, and I will be around. I might be on there. I don't on the show with them, just to add a little bit of the depth of the story to what's going on and stuff like that. Answer any questions anybody has. But the cool factor is having somebody else consume some PPW and review it on one of their shows for a change. I think might be the first time outside of our own show that I've seen that. Smokes.
Well, that's two awesome ideas that came up there. First from Brian Carter. He's thinking outside the box. Munson just set the place up with security cameras, and we'll just use that. That's one hell of an idea, I think. But also, I like this that Ed and Astrid are going to cover some indie wrestling on their show, and then why not PPW? And as you've mentioned before, how interesting to get some outsiders' ideas. But by outsiders, I mean people not affiliated with the company, or people not living in Saskatoon and going to the shows and stuff, but wrestling fans from elsewhere to take a look at this product, review it, see what they like about it. This is going to be exciting. I can't wait to watch it.
Yeah, it's gonna be great. I'm very interested to get their thoughts on it. But with that said, Papa Spokes, we could talk PPW all night, any night. That's just what we can do. But that's not going to be what we're doing tonight. Tonight, we're talking a little bit of history of pro wrestling. We're taking you on a trip through the territories, and we're going all the way to St. Louis. And I said at the beginning of the show about all the great things that you could be said about St. Louis, but we're going to go a little bit more in depth here tonight, Papa Spokes, give a little bit of more of the reasoning why that St. Louis is considered the gold standard, one of the best, if not the best territory in professional wrestling history. So much to talk about here, but as always, I'm going to turn it over to you, Papa Spokes, because I know you're going to hit us with a little bit of history and a lay of the land.
For sure. And just to add to what you said, this episode of Trip to the Territories will be one of the most important ones, because a lot of foundational stuff for the territories gets set up under Sam Muchnick and the St. Louis Wrestling Club. But jumping ahead a little bit here, yeah, let's get started. What better way to get started, Munson, than oh yeah,
got to get the beer. Always get Papa Smokes a beer. That's the number one rule around here.
For sure. Okay, now I feel ready, Munson. All right,
good. All right, let's go.
So how about something about the city of St. Louis in the state of Missouri? It lies on the Mississippi and Missouri rivers. Its basic population is 300,000, but the total metropolitan population is 2.8 million. So lots of suburbs and populous areas lying on the outside of the general city core. The city was founded as St. Louis in 1764. The United States acquired it as part of the Louisiana Purchase. Attractions include the 630-foot Gateway Arch. We've all seen a picture of that. Beautiful, simple monument, gigantic. And the city is known for music, blues, jazz, and ragtime primarily. And then for sports and culture, we have the St. Louis Cardinals of Major League Baseball and the St. Louis Blues of the National Hockey League. Both fine teams in their own right. So this is St. Louis, Missouri, kind of like a couple of these territories we've talked about before, smack dab in the middle of the Midwest. It's a decent-sized city. It's, I think, the 20th largest city in the U.S., but not a lot of other large urban areas in its general vicinity. So again, it's a city that has a little bit of isolation to it, so you have to travel to get there. This will become important when we talk a little bit later about traveling wrestlers and traveling champions coming through this area.
Yeah, notorious for those, definitely. So let's kind of start from the beginning. I mean, they had wrestling cards back into the first half of the 20th century, like many of the Midwestern cities did. It was, where can we go from there? I'm just trying to look through my notes to see what you didn't cover there in the first opening segment, though. But the major arenas, I guess. So let's talk there, because we can start with the major arenas that held the shows that took place in St. Louis, like the Kiel Auditorium, St. Louis Arena at Checker Dome, and more popular to what we're going to be talking about is the Chase Park Plaza Hotel, known for where they tape wrestling at the Chase. And oh my God, I can't wait to talk about that segment.
Oh yeah, very much so. But in order to talk about St. Louis wrestling, it's going to center around one person. I've already mentioned him, Sam Muchnick, a guy who grew up in St. Louis, learning sports writing as a young man, working for various local media outlets covering the Cardinals and also pro wrestling. He met a man named Tom Pax, the Midwest's top wrestling promoter. Muchnick became friends with Tom Pax, became his publicist, and started learning the art of promoting wrestling under Tom Pax, which would have been the ultimate teacher at that time, too. Muchnick had gone off to fight in the war as well, in World War II. Came back in one piece, so you got to think the guy is tough and a bit of a hero. If you came back from the largest armed conflict that the world has ever seen and made it back, you're a tough guy, absolutely, and a resourceful guy, and probably a little bit of a hero in the eyes of the community as well. So Muchnick was known in St. Louis as a sports writer, known as a guy who came back from the war and was starting to learn the art of promoting wrestling from Tom Pax. Eventually, he spent 9 years under Pax learning this, but got pissed off over a couple of payoffs that he considered too small, decided to end his relationship with Pax, and decided to start his own rival wrestling company. This is in 1942. So a long time ago. Muchnick was born at the turn of the century and didn't die until the 90s. He lived until he was 94 or something like that. So a long life full of activities the entire time. So this suggestion to Muchnick to start his own promotion was made by the wrestler Jim Londos. If you know anything about the history of wrestling, you know that Jim Londos still holds the record for the biggest money drawing wrestler ever in history. Now, the game was different back then. There weren't as many screens to watch it on. We're talking about live gates here too. But the Greek superstar Jim Londos was wildly popular throughout the States in the 40s and 50s. So if he made a suggestion to start a new promotion and offered his services for it, you better believe Muchnick was listening to that and knew that he could probably get a successful product out of that. Somebody else that helped Muchnick in the early days was outlaw promoter Jack Pfeffer, who's a very interesting character if you study him throughout the history of wrestling. I call him an outlaw promoter because he never participated in linking up his promotion with the main promotions in the country. He ran outlaw, which meant he did his own thing. He sometimes took wrestlers and gave them names that mirrored the famous wrestlers of the day, but weren't then. You know what I'm talking about? Like Lou Ches and other names like that, where he would kind of make a comparison with the name to a famous wrestler, but it wouldn't actually be him. Kind of little tricks like that. But Pfeffer was very successful as a promoter as well. So with the help of Jim Londos and Jack Pfeffer, Sam Muchnick started the St. Louis Wrestling Club. This was not so much a wrestling club as it was his company in promotion of professional wrestling. He also used Ed Strangler Lewis. Everybody knows that name. He was one of the main drawing wrestlers of his day, for sure the top heel of his day, the 40s and early 50s. Then this becomes extremely important. Sam Muchnick was loved, revered, respected all throughout the wrestling business. He was an honest promoter. He gave fair payoffs. He treated the boys well. He featured
a dropout by Papa Smokes all of a sudden on the show. That's the nature of doing these things live. It happens every once in a while. He'll be back with us momentarily to talking about Sam Muchnick and the St. Louis territory. It says he's entered the studio. We have a return. Papa Smokes is back on your screens.
Right when I was in the middle of being on fire there about Sam Muchnick.
You were on
always,
a roll, dude.
Right?
Yeah.
Always. But this was at the time when Muchnick, due to his popularity and respect throughout the wrestling business, was approached by a bunch of other main wrestling promoters in the territory days about forming a promoters union throughout wrestling in the U.S. They were going to call this the National Wrestling Alliance, and they did call it that. It was involved the various state athletic commissions and was completely above the board. This was a good alliance of promoters who would come together, share the bookings of a single world champion and a handful of other top wrestlers. So just to recapitulate what we've talked about a little bit in the past, this was the promoters of pro wrestling across the U.S. in various territories and various cities, meeting once a year. They always met in Hawaii because they wanted to have a nice week-long vacation / meeting. But what they would do was have meetings to decide who are the top 10 or 5 stars in wrestling and who's going to be the overall champion of this alliance, this National Wrestling Alliance. They would then agree upon a champion for the next period of time, perhaps the next year at a time. This wrestler would become champion and then take their first world title on tour throughout those territories. Now, for example, we all know various famous NWA champions, back from Golden Boy Buddy Rogers to Thesz to Gene Kiniski to Harley Race to Ric Flair, to the list, Jack Briscoe, Terry Funk, the list goes on and on and on. So once they decided on one of those guys to be champion, that champion would take the world title belt and tour all those territories. He would go to each of those cities, each show that they were throwing for each company, and he would wrestle their top guy. And the formula was that the world champion would have a very competitive match with the top guy from each territory, but ultimately, usually, keep the world title. But what it would do for the fans of that territory was legitimize their top stars. They would see their top star have a competitive, very close match against the world champion and say, wow, our guy in our town can hang with the world champion. He nearly had him. That legitimizes our company. We're just as good as the big ones in all the other cities and all the other states. And it just raised wrestling's profile so much higher. It's an ingenious idea. And not only the champion would come through, but there was, like I say, a handful of other top stars, heels and baby faces that would come through and just raise the business of each territory. Then they would all make money throughout this, right? The promoters that were members of the NWA would pay their dues and get a vote at the meetings, but then they would also make a lot of residual money through the gates that the world champion would draw when he came to town.
It was a genius idea, and Muchnick was at the heart of all this kind of stuff. And you know, like in researching for this and researching him in particular, a lot of great things said about him too. Like, not only was he good because he focused on the wrestling, like his wrestling was clean finishes, things that made sense. Gimmicks didn't happen unless they absolutely made sense to happen under Muchnick's watch. Not only that, but there's also stories about how not only would he pay you very well, especially if you're in a main event, but if you were booked to travel into one of his shows and for whatever reason the match had to be canceled or anything of that sort, he would turn around and agree to pay for the airfare and any other expenses that came out of the wrestler's pocket that was originally supposed to be booked on the show, so that he would keep that outstanding persona. Like, he wanted to be a good businessman, but at the same time respected by everybody in the business, kind of thing. And that's why it seems so many wrestlers did want to travel in and work for Muchnick.
Well, and remember too, the popular conception of pro wrestling is, especially back in those days, is it was related to the carnivals. It was known as a shady business. It was known as a business where some underhanded tactics were used. That's why promoters like Sam Muchnick that dealt with their wrestlers fairly, transparently, and honestly. That's why those guys got the respect, and that's why tons of top wrestlers wanted to work there. St. Louis wasn't on the easy geographical touring area that the guys could do. You know, you could do the West Coast or the East Coast and hit a lot of cities and make some money throughout that. But a lot of top wrestlers, all of them at the time, would gladly make the trip out right to the middle of the country there in St. Louis, Missouri, in order to work for Muchnick, because they knew they would be treated fairly. They could get a high-profile match and a good, fair payout.
100%, yeah. And so that level of respect made it become what is known as one of the most important offices that existed in the days of the territories for professional wrestling. Again, like when you mentioned St. Louis, at first I was kind of like, wait, how big is this one going to be? And then we start getting into it. I'm like, oh, wow. Like, I knew about Muchnick a bit. I know more now, having done all this research and everything like that. But this is phenomenal. Like how this was run, how it came across, and what we're going to talk about very soon, the television that they produced at the same time, kind of thing. Every single bit of it is why St. Louis had respect from everybody in the business. The way they did business had people respect them for every decision they were making at the time.
Yeah, and at the same time, there was a Vince McMahon Sr. up in New York that was doing very, very well. How can you not do well in New York when there's 15 million people in your city or whatever? You've got a captive audience that you can get fans and viewers from. But as far as the actual businessman and the guy who tried to just lift wrestling up from what it was to what it could be in the future, Muchnick was very well respected.
Yeah, definitely. So you want to talk about wrestling at the Chase, Pop Smokes?
Well, let me just finish a couple of thoughts here about
sure, yeah. My apologies.
Yeah, I'll just go through these notes here a little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
Eventually, Muchnick acquired the services of another top wrestler, that's Nature Boy Buddy Rogers. We brought him up before. He became one of the top wrestlers in the company. Huge charisma, huge success. That only brought Muchnick more popularity and more money. Now his company, his rival company, is growing enough to absorb his rival Tom Pax's company, so he ended up buying that. Imagine how the teacher felt about his student coming and surpassing him in the business. By 1950, Muchnick is NWA president, so he's the main guy running this alliance of promoters who are trying to build the wrestling business into making more money and making more fans through the traveling world champion. Muchnick held that post for 9 years due to the trust that he had from its members. Now a lot more companies, wrestling companies, wanted to join the NWA because of Muchnick. He had the respect, and they were seeing the success that this model was bringing. 63 to 75. Now Muchnick is NWA president again. So he spent a total of 25 years as the NWA president. So you can imagine, from all these top promoters, guys who are making money and being very successful in the business, if they keep voting for Muchnick to be NWA president and basically make the decisions that runs the entire U.S. and part of Canadian wrestling business, then imagine what the other promoters thought of him, right? They had ultimate trust in him because he had that eye for scouting, he had the eye for business, and then he ran a tight ship with no monkey business, no scandal that was going to bring him down, no lawsuits that were going to drain the company of money. He was doing everything by the books. So talking about his scouting, Muchnick could see a star in the making, and some of the wrestlers that he brought up through the St. Louis company, Johnny Valentine, Gene Kiniski, Harley Race, Dory Funk Jr. and Terry Funk, Ric Flair. That's just a few of the names. There were many, many others though. But think of that crop of talent alone, all world champions and all legendary figures in the business. And then the other legacy of Muchnick in the NWA is that he started spreading the company out to not just the continental United States, but to Mexico, the Far East, Europe, and the Caribbean as well. It was him that was instrumental in starting to get wrestling shows, American wrestling shows, down in Puerto Rico, which we've also discussed on Trip Through the Territories in the past.
Yes, we have. Before we move on here, Papa Smokes, though, Zach Minger came in while we were chatting. Hello, Zach. Thanks for coming in. BDJ's in the house saying Trip Through the Territories. What's up, boys? Happy to have him here. And then back to the topic, Brian coming in saying, and believe it or not, YouTube tried to block this comment because the name Dick the Bruiser. Anyway, my dad was a huge Dick the Bruiser fan and often told the story of how he went to St. Louis and saw him live there. That's awesome. Like, again, Dick the Bruiser, one of the greats, and I could see why your dad would make that travel.
For sure, and we'll talk a lot about Dick the Bruiser when we get to the Indianapolis territory because that was his home territory, and he was owner and then part owner of Indianapolis as well. Not so far from St. Louis. He's for sure making those trips. But we'll definitely be talking about Dick the Bruiser in the future.
Yeah. And Brett saying he loves this territory history. We're glad to bring it to you. I'm glad this show is successful the way it is too, because this was something we wanted to do that was definitely of interest to us. We just didn't know the reception it would get, and it's become pretty much one of our most popular segments here on Ring Respect Radio. So have we all done Southwest Championship Wrestling? I don't think we've covered that. Have we? No.
Is he talking about Knoxville, Tennessee under Ron Fuller? Because that is one we all want to get to. We have it on the list.
Let us know if that's the one you mean there, Brett. Curious to find out.
As we know from trivia, some of these companies, different companies, use the same names, so causes a little bit of confusion sometimes. Oh, he's talking about San Antonio. Well, no, I don't know much about that, and I don't think it's on the list. Brett, do you think there's enough stuff to do an episode on San Antonio?
Curious, but and the Blanchards, okay,
yeah, okay. I wonder if we should then. That's a good suggestion. Take a note, Nelson.
I like suggestions. I will. You know what? I got to go back to the old pen and paper here, but we'll make that note so that we get that down. I got picked on last time for going with the click on the computer here, so we will go back to the pen and paper. I'll write that one down. But yeah, Papa's folks, I always like these suggestions. But let's talk about, because we want to make sure we fit everything in. Let's talk about Wrestling at the Chase, because you messaged me the other night, and I didn't quite get back to you. Wanted to talk about it here tonight. I got so into Wrestling at the Chase watching this thing. Sometimes I'll go and I'll watch a match here and there kind of thing to get ready for these shows. And I found that I started doing my studying, and I get to the part where I'm reading about Wrestling at the Chase. Like, all right, I'm going to throw on some Wrestling at the Chase on YouTube. And next thing I know, I'm looking like I've been sat here for the last probably 3 hours straight just watching Wrestling at the Tape matches on YouTube, and I still wanted more. Like, it didn't even feel like 3 hours went by. It is that well produced. and even going back on YouTube, like there is so much content there, but it is awesome. Like so this show premiered back in May 23rd, 1959, and it ran for a long ass time. The tapings that we said took place at the Chase Park Plaza Hotel, and they just phenomenal way of going about doing your wrestling, again, because the fact that it was wrestling, it was actual wrestling, it wasn't gimmicky, it wasn't silly, it was good hard fought wrestling matches, and the commentary was just spot on, fantastic for this program as well too. Quick hello to Astrid before we go any further there, joining us as well too. Astrid, thanks for joining us here tonight. But yeah, I'm gonna hand it over to you, Papa Smokes, while I finish writing down the note here from Brett. But just fantastic is Wrestling at the Chase.
Yeah. And Muchnick had been running shows in St. Louis for years and kind of wondering how we could get the product a little boost to get it out to more eyes and more people. Sam Muchnick ends up taking a plane somewhere, and on that plane he meets Harold Koppler, who is a bigwig at Channel 11 in St. Louis, a program planner and all that, and a big guy at the channel anyway. They end up talking on the plane about this very problem, and Koppler ends up agreeing with Muchnick that we could probably get a pretty good audience for a wrestling show in St. Louis. Your live shows do very, very well. This was back when Muchnick was running at the Kiel Auditorium, a place where you can get 10, 15,000 fans in there. But they had an idea to do tapings. Now, at the Chase Plaza is also where the TV studio is, which works out nicely. But they have a giant ballroom which seats 900 or 1,000 people. So they decided to start doing the tapings Saturday nights the tapings weren't Saturday nights. The show was broadcast Saturday nights, but they would tape the show and then they could do production on it in the studio, which was in the same building. Very convenient. But they didn't even really do that much editing or producing of Wrestling at the Chase as a TV program. They wanted to broadcast it kind of live in the can. So it's not live as it's happening, but they don't screw around with any editing or anything like that. It's a one-shot production mostly. Might have been a couple other cameras involved, but they left everything in. They left the bloopers, they left any mistakes, they left any rough patches, anything, because Muchnick wanted that kayfabe feel to it. He wanted that real sports feel to it. And they got that, right? And also with a large live crowd of, imagine, we've all seen studio wrestling, the old Georgia Championship Wrestling and various other shows. The studio audience is pretty small. It looks like it's 75 to 100 people kind of thing, right? The studio audience isn't as important in traditional studio taped wrestling. But in this case, Wrestling at the Chase, they had 1,000 people there. So they're making some noise. They've got an actual live show going there. So it would further the angles of what was going on. There were angles, but really, Muchnick didn't really want to have much gimmicky stuff in there. He didn't have specialty matches such as cage matches and last man standing matches and first blood matches and all that kind of thing. Didn't go for that. In fact, Muchnick was so old school, he didn't even really like tag team wrestling because he thought it was too gimmicky. So this was almost all singles matches and presented as like a live show that you were watching on TV. We saw this with Kansas City as well. They took a similar approach to this on a much smaller level. Wrestling at the Chase was an event. It was free for the fans. They would sometimes do 2 or 3 shows back to back, so you might be there for 3 or 4 hours, but you got your dose of wrestling, and then you could watch it on the weekend. They did the Saturday night showing and then a Sunday morning rebroadcast if you missed that. And this show ended up being, for a long time, the third most watched show in the St. Louis area, behind the evening news and the St. Louis Cardinals games. So, wow, did they ever stumble upon a gold mine there?
Oh, 100% they did. And yeah, I'm just looking at our numbers here tonight, man. We're really getting some good numbers on the show. Make sure to keep the chat live and active if you got questions for us at all too. Happy to answer any questions related to tonight's topic. You know, and we talk about, like you said, 3 or 4 hours that people spend. Like, I mean, that's wrestling, Bob Spokes. I mean, we know it too. I mean, the people, when they want their wrestling, they will stay that 3 to 4 hours and they will consume it. And that's never changed. That has never changed from the early days of pro wrestling to today's days of pro wrestling. True dedicated fans of the sport will stick it out no matter what, because they're there for all of it. They're going to consume all of it. But yeah, and you're right. That was the thing I think that drew me in watching wrestling at the Chase. Well, I did, because again, this is more of the stuff that you and I like a lot more. The pure wrestling type stuff, the one-on-one matches, you know, again, not saying there isn't room for the other type of stuff when everything, or tag teams. I mean, yeah, tag teams, I definitely can get a lot more behind than Muchnick might have promoted during Wrestling at the Chase. But man, one-on-one matches that are clean, pure wrestling matches like they were, and solid every single time. Like, guys went in there and they gave it their all in these matchups for TV, for the live audiences, for everybody. And you mentioned a lot of the stars that went through this territory, and that's the thing. This wasn't just, you know, Johnny Nobody versus the big name guy of the time or anything like that. Like, you had some really, really badass lineups in terms of the star power that Muchnick was able to get on these shows.
Oh, everybody, like all the top guys of the days worked St. Louis at that time, because you wanted to be known by Muchnick and the St. Louis fans, because they had one of the hottest territories going at that time. Remember, this is starting in the late 50s too, before really the boom period of the 80s. This is at a time where not every territory was doing that great, but Muchnick built and built and built his company to be bigger and stronger, and he absorbed other companies along the way, and just made St. Louis Wrestling Club one of the big promotions of the time, even though it wasn't in one of the big cities. What we should talk about too, you already touched upon this, but the commentary is quite outstanding for St. Louis Wrestling as well.
Yes.
They had a couple of famous guys in the early days, but everybody will remember from the real heyday of St. Louis Wrestling, Larry Matisick. He becomes a very important figure in the history of wrestling as well, not only as Muchnick's trusted confidant and right-hand man in the company, but as quite a fine commentator as well. This is in the days too of not always having a two-man team, a play-by-play and then a color guy. You'd have to do it by yourself. So really, Matisick was a huge star in that. He's in all the halls of fame that you could possibly name. He was good friends with Bruiser Brody, who was a big star for St. Louis, and Matisick was very important in keeping Brody around there. Later on, after Sam Muchnick's company dissolved in 1983, Larry Matisick would go on to form his own wrestling company with some success. But as we all know, that period of the mid-'80s, or even the early 80s to the mid-'80s, was starting to be the swan song of the territory system, and Matisick couldn't keep going forever, but he's up there in respect, along with Gordon Soley and Lance Russell and Bob Caudle and all the famous guys from that period.
Yeah, one of the absolute best, legendary, man, and he owned that show. He really did. He was so good.
Yeah.
If anyone take a chance just to go listen in, even if you're not even as concerned about watching the matches you should be, because they're that good, but just listen to Muchnick talk and how he just brought to life that program so well. Absolutely amazing. And I just want to go to the sorry.
He was just going to say he was booking. He learned how to book behind the scenes too. They had former world champ Pat O'Connor doing some of the booking for Muchnick's company, and then Muchnick was his student, went on to learn booking, finishes, all that kind of stuff, became a fine booker and promoter in his own right as well.
You bet. Yeah, and I just want to bring up this comment again that Brett went to go look up some St. Louis wrestling while he's watching us live here, and apparently we are ranking top 3 in the searches for St. Louis wrestling right now. So that's fantastic, Brett. Love that statistic. I mean, it probably helps that we're currently live talking about the territory, but it's cool to be within that top frame, at least anyway. That's what we're aiming for. We can keep that going with more help from the chat as you file in here and ask us questions. We do got to get through a little bit more here, Papa Spoke. So really more moving on to kind of like the end times, I think would be the best way to go from here, unless you had some more on the territory you wanted to cover first.
Well, no, we can talk about, we just briefly mentioned that the company dissolved by 1983. Muchnick retired, and a group of promoters bought the St. Louis office. Group of promoters headed by Bob Geigel, who we've talked about before, who was one of the promoters in Kansas City. Larry Muchnick started competition, trying to keep Muchnick's ideas and spirit alive in his company. But Muchnick, like many other territory promoters, eventually had to sell to Vince McMahon in 1983. Vince McMahon, this was Junior, of course, the Vince that we all know. Vince tried to run WWF product in St. Louis and continued the series Wrestling at the Chase. He called his shows from St. Louis Wrestling at the Chase. They held them there. In fact, Hulk Hogan's first match in WWF, which coincided also with Gene Okerlund's first appearance in WWF, was at Wrestling at the Chase in 1983 at the Chase Plaza, and it never really took off. Kind of like when Vince tried to buy Georgia Championship Wrestling and run his own product in there. The fans were so ingrained in their grassroots product from their own state and their own city. They didn't want to see the big wigs from New York. They didn't want to see this different kind of wrestling. They wanted their guys, and they wanted Larry as the announcer. They wanted Sam as the promoter, but it was done. Times had changed, so they didn't take to WWF wrestling there. And eventually that office was sold by Vince McMahon to Jim Crockett Promotions, of all people, who tried to keep that going. They kept it going for a couple more years, but eventually the office closed for good in 1986.
Yeah, and then eventually absolved by, like you said, absolved completely by the WCW, and kind of brought a close to one of the most legendary, if not the most legendary promotion territory in history, or at least one of the most important. I think the best way to put it is one of the most important ones. Brett coming in. Sorry, I was gifted a membership in OVW, went to check it out. So WWF tried to take St. Louis. Yes, they did. They took the time slot. Took it right over, and pretty much killed it for that area. They like you said, Bob Spokes, people rejected it because it wasn't what they were used to, kind of thing. And times changed over, with television and the times, once you got into the 90s and everything like that. But that's not to say that the people who were dedicated, the people that were in that area that went on a weekly basis to go watch these tapings and, live and die by what they knew pro wrestling to be, this was different. This was not what they wanted, and they rejected it. Like most of the territories did at the time. They rejected the insurgence of WWF wrestling in their area.
Yeah, they wanted their homegrown product. That these families had all grown up watching this, right? If it started in 1958, or sorry, 48, 49. No, sorry, 58, 59. Then you're talking about 1983. That's a whole generation, right? You've got kids who grew up to be parents, who had kids who went to that wrestling the entire time. Then when it changes and everything's different and you don't get the same wrestlers, you don't get that same world champ coming through, and you don't get the integrity and the great booking and the great finishes of Sam Muchnick, Pat O'Connor, and Larry Matisick working behind the scenes. It's going to be a pretty different product, right? Same thing as in Atlanta, Georgia, when Vince tried to take over that time slot too. They wanted their wrestling, they wanted their traditional show that they grew up watching, and yeah, they rejected the new product.
You bet. Brett wants to know if we've done any Mid-South history. So,
well, not yet. We've touched on some aspects of it from doing some Texas wrestling and also Memphis, Tennessee, but Mid-South became its own thing under Cowboy Bill Watts. So we will do that territory. It is on the list also, so that'll be coming up.
You bet, yeah. We still got a fair bit to cover and everything like that. And once we feel like we've covered all those territories, we got plans in place, Pop Smokes. We're not gonna let the folks down. We're gonna expand Trip Through the Territories into something more once we get through all those territories, and we'll keep this train running. But yeah, at St. Louis, I had a blast talking about this one. I had a blast researching it, Pop Smokes. I'm still gonna go back and watch more wrestling at the Chase because I enjoyed it that much. I think this has been one of the most exciting ones that we've done to date, and I'm glad we did it. I'm really glad we picked this one.
Yeah, very much so. This was a foundational episode, even if only in the way that Sam Muchnick was such a respected promoter, and then the beginning of the National Wrestling Alliance is so important to the history of North American wrestling that you can't leave that out of any discussion. And Muchnick made a firm mark on the business through his business practices and through his wrestling knowledge, and it's you can't ignore that. As Sam Muchnick was making some of the main decisions that affected the entire business for, like we said, 25 years, president of the NWA. That's unprecedented, and it's just a testament to how much he was revered and respected all throughout American wrestling.
Yeah, you bet. Brett saying there's still many territories. Take Trip Through the Territories global. We've gone a little overseas, a couple times here with Trip Through the Territories. So you never know what could be down the road. I mean, we covered New Zealand, we covered Puerto Rico. We've been covering lots of North America, but you just never know where the show might take you, Brett. It's why you got to tune in every Thursday night to catch more Ring Respect Radio. With that said, Papa Smoke, I've got my fingers crossed, all my fingers crossed, and I'm praying to you, Mr. Divine Light, to be our savior and bring us some SPW Halloween haunting so that we can do that review next week. But I've got a plan. So if SPW is not available by Tuesday, I know which one is that we do need to cover, Papa Smoke, because our friends over at Winnipeg Pro Wrestling have dropped Battle at the Burt there on YouTube. So if we don't get SPW by this Tuesday, we're doing Winnipeg Pro Wrestling for next Thursday.
Okay, that sounds awesome. And Rumble at the Burt being their big show of the year, we have to do that one. I also noticed that WPW has another show, I think, coming up in the future where they're going to be performing with the Winnipeg Orchestra in the background. You believe that?
That's going to be wild. Wow, I can't wait to check that out. Oh, I love that. That sounds like a really cool idea. Like, bring that on for sure. I can't wait.
I'm trying to wrap my mind around that, how that's going to go. I mean, are they going to have some kind of a orchestral, exciting movie score thing for when Tyler Colton comes out to the ring, or what's going to be the draw? I don't know. Are they doing the entrance musics? I don't know. There's be a little concert in the middle. We'll see, but I'm definitely interested.
Could you imagine the Jack Jesus coming out to an orchestra version of Renegade. Bring it on. Bring it on. I can't wait. That sounds absolutely amazing. But Papa's folks, we're getting to the end of the show, top of the hour, and I think it's about time we spent a little money on this program. We put that beautiful ticker of yours on the screen, and you can tell everybody here where they can find you.
All right, let's do it up, everybody. I'm always here Thursday nights at this time, whatever time it is in your particular time zone. For Ring Respect Radio, it appears on OLE Podcasts and the Video Bros Network. If you need to contact me or want to for any reason, I am on X, Elon Musk's Free Speech Wonderland, at smokes_papa. I'm also on Twitch at papa_smokes_. And I wonder if Brett ever found me there.
Not too sure, but he wasn't wrong. You are a tricky one to find on there, Pop Spokes. Good thing I follow you already. But as for myself, Bobby Munson at the X, at Real Bobby Munson, Instagram, Threads, at Video Bros SK, Twitch, it's VideoBro_Bobby Munson, Blue Sky, BobbyMunson.bsky.social. For what I got coming up, you can, of course, catch me this Sunday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, because, yes, we are keeping to our Eastern time slot on Sundays. So, yes, 11 a.m. Eastern Time for Point of View, where we talk about the week in sports. We give you those NFL predictions that I didn't do too well at this week. Ooh, that one hurts. I dropped to second place after these ones, but we got all sorts of great sports talk to go over with you this coming Sunday, so stay tuned for that. And of course, as always, back here with you, Bob Spokes, next Thursday for more Ring Respect Radio. And where else can you find us? How about Saturdays on YouTube over at Prairie Pro Wrestling? Go check out Prairie Pro Wrestling on YouTube. We are your commentary team. That's where you're going to find new matches. And speaking of that, Papa Spokes, you and I got to get heading on over to go and do a little commentary here tonight so I can have a match ready for Saturday. So we're going to take off to do that. Yes, thank you, Munson and Professor Spokes. Thank you, Mangler. We appreciate you and everybody who's here every single Thursday supporting the show, or if you're watching on replay, that as well, too. Where you can find us outside of the Video Bros Network, you can also find us right here on OLE Podcasts across all social media, as well as YouTube and Twitch, where we appreciate you giving us follow, a like, subscribe, giving us a thumbs up, turn on that notification bell, leaving a comment in the comment section afterwards. What were some of your favorite matchups from the St. Louis territory? Let us know in the comment section below. We appreciate you being there on Ring Respect Radio, and we'll see you in 1 week's time. Take care, everybody.